Welcome to everyone joining for this, the last in our TPC webinar series. The Genies have left the bottle. I can still see a whole bunch of you joining. We'll be underway just after 2 o'clock. Thank you for those who've been a part of the series so far. Normally I'll be plugging upcoming webinars, but as we haven't got it at the moment, just a little plug for TPC 21. If you want to be there and to get the best price, just head on to the website. On the contact page, there's an opportunity to say that, which will mean when we go on sale, we'll send you an email with a very special offer. But we'll be underway in about a minute's time with David Thomas and his colleague Robert Smith in the last of our series, The Genies Have Left the Bottle. Okay, folks, so I think we'll make a start on this, the last in our webinar series for now. Fingers crossed we don't have to launch another one to keep us all sane in another round of lockdown. But the title of this one, and the one I really have been looking forward to, is The Genies Have Left the Bottle. Will be about 45 minutes today. We tend to keep Fridays a little bit shorter and sweeter. We are recording as ever, and the session, along with everything else that's gone before, can be found on our website and YouTube channel from later on today. A little bit of a different format today. We're going to start off with David Thomas from Vivitic at the top there. He's going to be going through his 6 wishes or for the genie in the bottle of what's going to change. You're going to get a chance to vote on the top 3 you think things we're going to see change. And then we'll jump into a bit of an open Q&A discussion, chinwag with David, George at the bottom, and myself, Andrew Thomas from the Ticketing Professionals Conference. When we get to the Q&A, you'll find Q&A at the top or the bottom of your screen in your toolbar. Hit Q&A, and in that you can actually hit thumbs up and comment on other people's questions as well, so we can get to that. But without further ado, as we often refer to, cousin, I'd like to introduce Mr. David Thomas. David, are you there?
I am indeed, Andrew. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. It's a great honor to be hosting this final webinar of TPC 2020, a truly remarkable series of events that has contributed greatly to both the interchange of information and knowledge and the feeling of interdependence of those it has engaged. We have grown and grown stronger because of it, and I believe we have grown together because of it. Now, this final session of the season is a bit different in that it's more personal and speculative than what has come before. I will be attempting to shed a little light on some aspects of the post-COVID landscape, based on a handful of elements that may have become of greater interest and of higher priority as a result of organizations having to face the challenges of the crisis. And for each of the areas I touch upon, I will be introducing a character to illustrate the issue. In case anyone is wondering, any resemblance to characters living or dead is purely coincidental. So, Genie Number One, automated refunds and exchanges. Barry, the box office manager. When Barry started in the business, every box office frontage had signs screwed to them declaring no refunds or exchanges. And about 30 years ago, his venue attempted to introduce what the management referred to at the time as a Marks and Spencer policy. For a moment, Barry thought that he and his team would have to sell underwear, but the truth was even more worrying. Patrons would, for the first time, be allowed to exchange their tickets for future performances without having to plead for flexibility on compassionate grounds. It didn't last long. The next producer to rent the venue soon put a stop to that. And Barry and his team reverted to putting tickets back on resale on the customer's behalf, but only once the theatre had sold their producer seats and PPs, of course. Then came the pandemic, with refunds and exchanges on a scale never dreamt of before. And as the lockdown was extended, so Barry refunded further and further out. For his brother, who worked on an annual sporting event, it was even more of a challenge, trying to move hundreds of thousands of bookings into the following year. Of course, both brothers worked closely with their ticketing providers to safely automate the process as much as possible, and they both look forward to the day when exchanges would revert to the former resale policy and the odd discretionary exchange. And then they read the leading headline of Indigo's brilliant audience survey. The single most important factor determining when, and probably whether, audiences would book again was the ability to exchange or refund. Now, no one knows how long the aftershocks of COVID will reverberate through the population. Some of those aftershocks, excuse me, may be related to pockets of the virus itself, fear of the virus, or the economic impact of the virus. And it may be the case that event insurance can expand to mitigate the ticket purchaser's risk to the extent the venues can easily cope with the level of exchanges on a strictly manual basis. But until then, Barry, his theatre, and their producers may need to maintain a more streamlined, automated, and dare I say it, Marks and Spencer's approach. In doing so, they and others like them may well be entering into an unwritten agreement with their audiences, an unspoken compact to continue flexibility in perpetuity. And audiences may well react negatively to the first management to try and rescind what may have become looked upon as a right secured through support for the crisis. Genie number 2, live and recorded content streaming, Victor the videographer. I remember years ago pleading with a producer to let me video the last couple of performances of his West End show, so that he would have a lasting record of the magnificent production and its critically acclaimed performances. Otherwise, I concluded, all you have left is a few walls of archive material and the hangover from the last night party. And an effing big bill, David, was his reply. A few years later, Victor started working in the business, filming excerpts of live shows for charity events and promotional EPK. There was also some archive work. The archive filming was pretty flat because of the budget, but that didn't matter so much because few people knew how to access the archives anyway. Then, spearheaded by NT Live, the streaming of shows into cinemas became such a success that when Billy Elliot the musical was broadcast live, it was the highest grossing production in UK cinemas that weekend. Now, more than once, Victor wondered if there would ever be a day when plays and shows and concerts would have a second life in the nation's living rooms. And then came the pandemic, and streaming of live and recorded content became, for a time, the only way that an organisation in the entertainment and cultural sectors could safely engage with their once and future audiences. Back catalogues could be monetised or mobilised to help market new productions. families and couples in lockdowns would become accustomed to streaming shows that they had missed or seen previously. Entire opera seasons streamed and, more importantly, devoured, production by production. Maybe wishful thinking, but as far as Victor is concerned, this genie is well and truly out of the bottle. And personally, I agree with him on this point. It remains to be seen how many licensing departments echo his view over the months and years to come. Genie number 3, Sarah the usherette, mobile ticketing. Now, on paper, Sarah's employment is based on a legal obligation to safeguard the health and safety of patrons during their visit to her venue. She is also paid to sell ice creams during the incoming and interval. Once or twice a week, she will work as a redcoat at the theatre doors, greeting patrons as they arrive, directing them to the bars and the cloakrooms, helping organise them into the right doors for their seats, and helping with security checks. You will not see her name in any of the programmes and brochures, but her wages are included in the price of your ticket. And as with so many of her front of house colleagues, her interactions or contact points with the patrons contribute enormously to the overall experience of a live event. And when audiences return to our venues, Sarah will be serving in the front line. 8 shows a week. Simply getting audiences into their seats and back into the street will be a massive challenge in the weeks and months to come, especially in older venues where common areas will often include narrow corridors and winding staircases perpetually congested with the overflow from the restrooms. Mobile ticketing can potentially enable the relaying of in-visit information, a vital role that was previously shared between Sarah and the venue signage. The mobile back of ticket could theoretically be used to guide patrons to and from their seats by the safest route and at the scheduled time. And it can, unlike paper tickets, update those seat numbers and times depending on changes required to the seating, or from GA to designated seating, for example, and help to coordinate audience flow within the building. It can also be used to communicate vital health and safety instructions. In addition to providing links for ordering or pre-ordering drinks, ice creams, snacks, pre- and post-show ordering of merchandise, and sharing venue history and other visit-enhancing content, or areas of interest in the area and co-promotions for transport and transport information and updates. But the biggest win, it will enable Sarah and her colleagues to fulfill their key role of engaging with the public as the human face of the venue, to help transform the visit into an unforgettable event. And that will be just as much a priority after the pandemic has been relegated to a distant and horrible memory. Genie number 4, automated ticket kiosks, Barry's cousin Blodwin. Now, Barry's cousin Blodwin is a ticket seller and tour guide at a fabulous historic attraction nestling on the banks of the River Llanrugb in Wales. The only problem is that the murderous Tudor warlord had designed the 600-year-old edifice to keep people out rather than welcoming them in. Namely a moat and drawbridge, arrow slits and portcullis, rather than reception area, booking office and tea rooms. Low season, the number of visitors are easy enough to cope with. But come the peak weeks, with the coach parties and school groups, the queue from the ticket office can run halfway around the moat. Then comes the pandemic and the return from lockdown. And crowds flock to enjoy the ancient battlements and world-famous herb gardens, only to find that distancing has quadrupled the length of the line, and the venue have yet have quadrupled the length of the line. Now, the venue have yet to decide whether to install automated ticket kiosks. They would obviously prefer to handle all the bookings in advance online, but know that a high percentage of their business is decided on the day and on the spot. Kiosks represent one option for capturing that late demand and improving the experience of patrons laying siege to the venue. For Blodwyn, however, just as with Sarah, what is important is the degree to which automation can reduce the repetitive drudge work and free up time for more visit-enhancing customer interaction. And after the crisis is over, she will not want to go back to upsell a family into 3-day passes in a mix of Mandarin and improvised pidgin English when she could be recreating Gwen Williams' blood-curdling attack on the Normans at Kidwelly. A scary sight. Genie number 5, beacon scanning and facial recognition. Sid and Ronnie. In a sense, these two likely lads are refinements or extensions of previous points mentioned this afternoon. And during social distancing, they may well present viable alternatives to sellotaping an access control scanner to a selfie stick and holding it out at arm's length. Beyond the pandemic, however, we may well see the use of beacons extended beyond its current usage, allowing a larger spectrum of attractions and venues, greater potential for interaction, engagement, and ancillary product promotion in areas where patrons have the time and space to circulate and spend freely. And if those patrons are likely to be circulating from one event or venue to another, facial recognition, providing it complies with the very strictest data protection regulations and can be trusted to do so, could be just for ticket. But it would be just a ticket for access and egress. No opportunity to communicate with the patrons pre, post, or in visit. And as we are all acutely aware, it is impossible to update or upgrade our faces. Genie number 6, the biggest genie of them all. One final thought. Perhaps the biggest genie to escape from the bottle is not any one single innovation or approach, but rather the way the crisis has driven us as an industry to reassess and reevaluate every aspect of our operational and commercial thinking, forcing us to barbecue on sacred cows, peer into the darkest, most neglected corners, and identify the strategies we need to adapt and survive in this harsh new landscape. And if that truly becomes a habit for us and our ongoing modus operandi, then not only will our own businesses become more resilient to changes in the trading environment, the sectors and audiences we serve will benefit greatly from our increased responsiveness to their actual and anticipated needs and wishes. Thank you for your time.
Okay, so that was David's 6 kind of genie wishes on things that are going to change. So I wanted to put out a little poll now for you to pick your top 3 of those wishes and which ones you think are going to come true. And I'm just going to knock my video on there, which is very rare for me. You can see I've gone full Robert Peston with my own logo in the background. So the question is, for those of you watching on demand, because it doesn't record the polls, which 3 of the topics do you think will see the most post-COVID? And the results are coming in now. You can pick 3, just 3 only, pick from those on that vote box. Results coming in. We'll close it out in a couple of seconds' time. Last couple of votes. If you haven't voted, this is your last chance. I'm going to hit end on that one and share with everyone. Clearly, David and George, who's also on with us as well, the the first three, the top three, which is basically the automated refunds and exchanges, live and recorded streaming, and mobile ticketing. So if you want to get a question in or a discussion point, please do put that in now. And as it's the last one, we'll even try with moving you up to a panelist so we can have a conversation probably about it as well. So if you have got a question, get it in now in the Q&A box. I'm going to start off because, you know, for me, I always thought that the refunds and exchanges would be the one that comes up, because it seems to me, apart from what's gone on in our industry in terms of being shut down, the biggest stories, unfortunately, I've seen have not been the success of, you know, auto refunds, rather than the consumers being a bit peeved with them. But also, we've seen some great success stories of Audit Through, Testatura, Spectrix, TicketSolve, and others, without naming every system in existence, have launched these, you know, refund or refund to donation bits of software as well, which I think has been really, really good. But how much? I mean, how much is the keeping hold of the money, because it's the producer's money and therefore I can't give you refunds? David, how much of that is related to number 6? You know, the fact we can't give refunds because our producers won't let us because it's their money.
So that's a question that will have a different answer with every organisation, and depending on when the performance is cancelled and how far the accounting has gone. You know, I don't think there's one single answer to that, but it is obviously an area that will be looked at more and more closely as a result of this last terrible few months. Is there a solution that will enable the very rapid return of monies or exchange? As you say, the political dimension or the economic dimension is far more complex than the technical one, which is actually quite simple. So it's if there's a will, then we have the way.
Yeah. Okay. Q&A is open if you want to get questions in, or comments, or discussion points. Happy to pick them up, pick them apart with David, Robert, myself, and maybe even promote you up to a panelist as well. But yeah, it's the refunds exchange is so big, and it's not just us. We've seen it with the airlines as well. It's ongoing. Mr. O'Leary and other airlines or holiday companies not giving money back but offering vouchers instead. Live and recorded content streaming, which, you know, I've seen today plans for the Opera House to reopen. We've had the restreaming of sports events. And of course, last week we had that much publicised £65 a ticket for the Old Vic. And I just wonder whether people keep thinking that we're going to lose people to couch and a glass of wine rather than coming to the theatre. But how do we make the difference, David, to stop me sitting at home in Tooting or in Tottenham or in Totnes thinking I'm not going to go to the theatre?
You are asking the question that producers have been asking for the last 1,000 years, at least, that you would have had Shakespeare talking to the King's men saying, well, how can we get them to come, you know, all the way across muddy London to see our production? You probably would have had a similar conversation going on between Aeschylus and his backers, Euripides. It has always been the question, it will always be the question, and it will be up to the ingenuity and the energy of the rights holders and their performers to make something so utterly compelling. But not only would you cross London from Tooting or wherever, you'd cross London on bended knee, carrying a weight on your back, just to be there to see that, because You'd heard about it probably from someone else who'd already been there. And you knew that being in that audience at that time was going to be one of the most amazing experiences of your life. That is the compulsion that we always count on to drive people to shows, plays, concerts. It's not, oh, wouldn't it be nice to go there? Yeah, there is a bit of that, but it's that hunger. You know, if I could tell you now how to create that hunger in pill form or whatever, then actually I would turn off the session now and go out there and make my billions, because it is the secret to life in the West End, in rock music, in cinema and everything else. Nobody knows. No one has the answer, I promise you. And then once in a while, someone will find it.
Or you can sell it to Amazon, because they're obviously looking at a way to get back in the game. So, a couple of questions coming in. Leon was first in, all the way up there in Aberdeen. Hello, Leon. And he said, I'll be interested in hearing thoughts on impact of social distancing and financial viability of live entertainment. And also his thoughts, the thoughts on receiving theatres which rely on that touring product. How can these non-producing theatres take advantage of the inevitable move towards digital and streaming? So if you want to handle the financial part, David, because you understand that, and then maybe Robert come in with some ideas on some of the technology that we're going to need to invest in, possibly from a technology point of view.
Well, we were.
David and Robert, you can see the Q. If you hit Q&A, you can probably see the questions in there as well.
So I wasn't expecting a question on distancing, because this was supposed to be addressing post-COVID, but in terms of how you can make a production wash its face, given the rules that will be introduced in whatever form. If you have a modern 1,500, 2,000 seater venue, and you have a small cast, probably without an orchestra, you've always got the question. So if you, at the moment now, we've got quite a few playhouses, like 1,000 seaters, 1,100 seaters, with a big musical in. And it's a challenge for them to keep the wolf from the door. There is no margin there. I promise you. Even with today's or last year's prices, if you've got 30 people in the cast, 30 in the band, or 16 in the band, 100 people working between backstage, box office, front of house, and you've only got these 1,100 seats in order to pay for that, then you've got the rates and the light and the heat. Now, light and the heat, you think, well, it's minimal. No, depending on the venue, your power bill could eat up the first 5, 6, 7 rows of the stalls in revenue. So it always is the question, how you adapt that now. I think more difficult is how do you address the issues of the getting folks in and out through the common areas, loos, actually distancing inside. It's really a case of confidence, I feel, more than necessarily safety. And as much as, if someone sneezes or coughs, a meter or 2 meter doesn't make any difference. Seriously, it can travel 15 meters, a decent cough. So we're putting together a way of behaving which inspires the confidence of theatre goers, but it would ultimately, I feel, need either a vaccine or heat testing as people go in, like coming off a plane, checking for people with temperatures, being able to isolate areas if someone sneezes or starts coughing. Those sort of areas, I think, are more of a challenge than actually just doing the sums and saying, well, I'm taking out half the house, or I'm taking out 3/4 of the house. How much do I have to price to in order to pay everyone's wages and a little bit for the show itself? So it's easier if you've got a bigger venue with a smaller cast, but it's what do you see on the stage in order to make that work. That's going back to my earlier point, that's a real challenge. If you get people in, they will pay a reasonable amount in order to see the show, but there won't be, unless you're, go to the second point, unless maybe you're getting auxiliary revenue streams from streaming.
But surely the problem's going to be with streaming is, it's great if I can make extra money by pushing my product out of my theatre to people sat at home.
Yeah.
Like you are now. But then the more I push it out, surely that stops people coming in. And I've still got to have something on my stage, which I've got to cover the cost of in order to push it out. If I'm bringing it in through streaming from a bigger house in a bigger city, I've still got the issues of people not wanting to socially or wanting to be in a packed room. And why should they come and sit in a Manchester Theatre in Aberdeen and watch it when they can sit at home? So there's this really strange situation where we're damned if we do and we're damned if we don't.
I think there is even if it's a depleted auditorium, there is something quite different about being with a group of people experiencing the same thing at the same time. There is a buzz, even if there's a gap on either side, that we have as a species, we've signed up for 40,000 years, sitting around a campfire. Or
it's interesting that, I mean, Rebecca Malloy comes in with a note here about going back to that Indigo survey that says the biggest thing people actually missed was that buzz of live events.
Yeah.
Which I think backs up your point there. But we'll move on to, we've got two more questions in here. Natalie, who's been on a lot of these. Thank you, Natalie, for your question. A discussion point, she says. Outside of the theatre industry, I've seen on social media there's so many complaints about the hospitality, hotel, holiday, other sectors not being able to access refunds. She said, I'm really, really proud to work in organisations that actually tries to have a bit more personalised relationship and care about our customers. So I guess my suggestion to all producers and venues is that we start building a contingency into budgets to make refunds exchange easily more flexible. And she just says, I don't have the answers, but I guess it's a small cog in a bigger picture. What have you been doing? You know, have you been spending a lot of engineering time in this area of refunds? Obviously from a software firm.
Over to Mr. Smith for that one.
Yeah, so it's taken up quite a lot of our time recently, and the way organisations want to do it is fairly individualised as well. Predominantly, people are wanting to give refunds if there are no other options, and in some cases it's quite significant amounts of money, of course, for large events and things like that. But it's been possible to do it and offer other options and deferments and things like that. So, but that's a key area of work at the moment.
I'd be interested, whether you can answer this as well, because I've speaking to a number of actual, ticketing software providers. Have you found the roadmap has shifted and suddenly things that were way down on the list of things to add to product have suddenly gone up, and other things have got? Have you seen a shift in the kind of development cycle generally of changing priorities that we found ourselves in?
I think obviously we would have done very little work on refunds, so that's the obvious thing that's come up, and I'm sure that's the same for many. There is quite a lot of interest in also sort of wallet or e-ticketing, because it reduces levels of contact, potentially facilitates electronic access control. Obviously that's a bit of an issue in venues in the West End, really, because of the space constraints, but in other areas it's quite relevant, but also in that area the potential to deliver information along with the ticket and get that information quite timely and up to date. So, for example, the question earlier about sort of the fill-in of the venue, trying to preserve social distancing, you can pretty much figure out a plan that's individualized, potentially to seat level if you want, and communicate that information on the back of the ticket, for example, with e-ticketing. So there are sort of new considerations that are coming up where these things seem to be growing in relevance and importance.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen lots of pieces on LinkedIn and Twitter about social distance seating plans and people showing how they're going to sell blocks of 2s and 3s. But of course, if you make it digital, very much like an Italian restaurant, when they look at their booking for tonight, they arrange all the tables to have 10 and 6 and 5 and 4, rather than, all these tables of 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. So obviously it gives us an advantage. I mean, like we've seen with airlines, I've done it for years with boarding passes that are reissued at the gate, or with electronic passes that, when they change the plane around. So I think I'd rather see digital ticketing and my ticket update with my new seat, rather than having to buy 2 tickets in a group of 2, and the 3 of us want to go to a show. There's no groups of 3 available.
No.
The ability to sell off an unreserved plan almost, and then seat the audience almost like a wedding when you know who's there. So I think that gives a great opportunity. Right, 2 more. Billy, he's been waiting a long time. Billy, new job Billy, we call him. Now at Coventry City of Culture. Well done, Billy. The new technologies David has mentioned are often expensive. They shouldn't replace the human interaction. It's a contentious start. We know this is still important. How can venues that are struggling financially already justify or being able to finance these outgoings, buddying up with other venues and bulk buying, ? Increased ticket prices, ? Sponsorship, ? How do we find, I mean, as you said, David, venues, and I know a lot of them, were on the verge of being insolvent and just keeping the wool from the door. And now I'm going to have a plexiglass cone over every seat, no food and beverage, half the capacity or a quarter of the capacity, and you want me to buy some scanners. So how do we approach this?
I think there will still be gin and tonics.
The old method.
I think the live experience, certainly for some shows, without a couple of gins, would suffer greatly. As to the answer to the question here, if I had that answer again, I'd be closing down and going out. But one thing to consider, and one thing that's always amazed me, in other countries, you would have the BMW theatre, you would have the Santander theatre. I am the proud owner of theatrenamingrights.com and .co.uk. I've had them for about 10 years. They've never made any money for me. My dream is to have a 1,600-seater. It's a dream I share with a friend. A 1,600-seater, which is the best size for a musical, somewhere in the West End, and it would be paid for fully by a sponsor who would then get £1 a year return. No rent, no association other than their name wherever it's seen. Now, to me, 100 years in the middle of the West End associated with great shows, and that's worth the price of a theatre. We don't do it in this country. People have attempted it at different times. That's why I bought the domain names. But that's one area. That's one way of doing it. It is the best bloody advertising. If you think how much TV time you would get for the same amount, and you know what? People forget about TV ads before they finish.
Maybe it works for Theatre Royal Drury Lane, but I can't really see the Sports Direct Theatre Royal Winchester. Can you know?
All right. But
Fortnum & Mason Theatre Royal Winchester.
Yeah, I mean, that's just maybe. How about this for controversy? Maybe that 20% of your ticket price, which is VAT, is actually, if you're going to take it, why not put that into somewhere? There were 5 magnificent theatres built, including, correct me if I'm wrong, Andrew, the Millennium in Cardiff, the Lowry, and they were all paid for out of lottery money originally. There was a huge investment. So there is a lottery, there is the VAT, there is naming rights. Ultimately, they have to wash their faces. So it's an ongoing thing. It's not just opening the doors, it's getting people back there. But there are areas that other countries use, or we have used in the past, that we can use again.
I think this series, we had a lot of people join this. Looking back on the whole series, we had a lot join from North America, and I had a lot of comments coming in that they found some of our take on fundraising and sponsorship quite basic, and nice emails, nice feedback, but they found us, ahead in other ways of segmentation or bits and pieces. So I think it's time for us, I think the challenge I'd like to put down to a lot of people who have been on this series is like you say, is to look outside our shores at what works elsewhere. And I can't imagine when I go and look at performing arts centres I visit in the US, or even small regional theatres, the idea of not having a naming right sponsor to it.
The most successful arena on the planet for the last 12 years has been the O2. The O2 makes half its revenue from those 5 letters, the O2. Half of what it pulls in is through the naming rights. The other half is through all the other successful events, catering, everything else. That used to be the case. It might be slightly different now, but there are opportunities there for business to ally themselves with something wonderful, or government to say, all right, we'll scrap HS2. No point being in Birmingham 11 minutes earlier because it takes 30 minutes to get onto a platform there. We'll take the HS2 money and we'll use that for theatre stock.
Or Trident. Anyway.
Well, no, I don't like that.
Right.
That's too big a show.
Okay. Right. Moving on. It's obviously a new job Q&A because Hattie's on next. And she asks, are we likely to? Which is, we're likely going to need to share more resources, information, work practice, etc., between venues than ever before. Do you think we're going to see a rise, or need to see a rise, in the grouping of venues like Sheffield Theatres, Bradford Theatres, Norwich Theatre, and groups like the London Theatre Consortium?
I think that's inevitable, at least in the short to medium term. At the moment, however, the bigger challenge is for the disparate groups that are represented in our UK live entertainment sectors to unite, to come up with a common voice, to outshout everyone else who's lining up to get money out of the government. That's, it's a bigger agglomeration, a bigger grouping together that the whole industry needs in order to get that money, to get those resources when we're competing with, schools, hospitals, defence, other areas like that. So it's true at that level as well as on the smaller level. These webinars have seen people coming together, sharing information. The point at which you have enough leverage to actually make a difference will be different from, depending on the group. But yeah, it's got to happen. Isolated on your own, you cannot compete for the attention and the resources. It's my feeling. Andrew, you know the scene better than I do, across the country. What do you think?
It's going to be incredibly hard, and actually it leads us on nicely to Derek's question in. Derek, who's CEO of the Sports Direct Theatre Royal Winchester, so I love winding him up. But he says maybe it's time to acknowledge that for the foreseeable, we can't run the existing business model. So let's stop deluding ourselves. Maybe we need to scale down significantly to tough decisions, focus on community engagement, diversify connectivity locally, and then scale back up when we're ready and audiences have the confidence to return. This might give us the chance to refresh our base, engage with younger people, and replenish aging audiences in the longer term. And I think a lot of the, Derek's point there is, I think there's a lot of truth there that I think I've read so many things, from us sitting in cones to us queuing, 1 through 1,000 on squares down, Shaftesbury Avenue, to take our seat in a theatre. I just think it won't, unless the audience wants to come back and will feel safe to come back. Again, going back to that Indigo webinar of 3 weeks ago, I just can't see business going back to normal. And that hurts me to the centre of my soul, because it breaks people's businesses. People on this webinar who rely on selling tickets or selling sell tickets or gin tickets.
Andrew, someone will do something that will cause that buzz, and that buzz will get out there and people will want to see it. That's how it's always worked. 81 third of the theatres were dark. No one would have ever imagined that we'd have had 20, 25 shows making a living, let alone a healthy living in the West End at any one time. But it's that content plus the experience, that live experience, and you manipulate that. It's not a given. But we're very good at producing live content, and we're very good at producing live experiences. You know, pound for pound, person for person, we lead the world in that. The only other area where we lead the world is jet engines, and we're not going to be making many of those for the next few years. So it's an area of expertise that these little islands have, both for their own domestic audiences and further afield. And whereas anyone, 99 people out of 100 would agree with you, my experience is that if something brilliant is put on, we will sell our prized possessions and go through awful hoops in order to be part of that. And that's my take on that.
Well, on that positive call for enthusiasm going forward, I'd like to thank
I'm writing it now. Okay. I'll send you an invitation to the first night.
Or you're buying the website domain to sell it on.
Exactly.
Anyway, thank you, David and Robert, for joining us this afternoon. Thank you for being part of the over 4,000 registrations in this series. When I woke up about 6 weeks ago and thought I'd put this together, never dreamt we'd get this far. I'm off for a well-earned gin and tonic, I think, and I don't even drink gin. So David, Robert, thank you very much for joining us, and I thank you for such a positive end to this season. Thanks everyone who's on this afternoon, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I've enjoyed hosting it. And fingers crossed we don't have to have a second season, and we can see you all in Birmingham in March for a drink or three. But good afternoon and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks very much.
Bye.